totally agree with Michael. I think it's one of those, it's probably a different experience when you're watching it on telly to when you're out there. The weather's not helping. It is not stopped raining. So I think being cold and it's just
Newsnight, après le déluge. The place to be on this Friday night for gold medal winning conversation and insights. For the past 4 hours, the River Seine has offered up a spectacular, if wet, backdrop to the opening of Paris 2024. It's just finished.
See them on tonight. You can hear the noise when we're covering Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And I would like to see it change. Some famous faces in there. Tom Daley and Helen Glover is here. And we move.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try.
But it hasn't all been smooth sailing after a series of apparently coordinated attacks on France's rail network. Who's behind it? Here on the Newsnight sofa to explore the Olympic highs and lows, former Boris Johnson PR guru Joe Tanner, journalists Zing Tseng and Bénédicte Pavio, and Air Vice Marshal Bob Judson, who was on the Olympic Security Board for London 2012. Welcome to you all. Thank you so much for coming in, especially on a Friday night. Bénédicte, if we start with you as the only French representative here tonight, I mean, clearly it must have been a very stressful morning, but how do you think France will be feeling now that the ceremony has passed off soggy but successful?
Successful and yes, alas, soggy. Lots of preparation, 50,000 police officers in Paris, 80,000, and army as well, 80,000 across France. Very worrying morning, of course, with this attack on the high-speed rail network. Nobody injured, important to say that. Clearly some inside knowledge, perhaps confirmed by your security expert, but some disruption still, because of course it's the peak holiday time for French people moving from one end of France to the other. I think this was a beautiful ceremony.
And it was showcasing the country.
It was showcasing Paris, it was showcasing culture. Culture in France is a part of your DNA. It's got an enhanced meaning even than what it means here in the United Kingdom. Perhaps I would say that as the daughter of a French film director. So visually Paris is stunning during the day, and for me, maybe it's a very French thing to say, but I was born in Paris, and I feel very influenced by the beauty around me. And that ethos of beauty, of literature, we saw the Louvre, we saw the museum, we saw many things, and that is such a part, and song, and
Yeah, because I was going to say,
France,
you might have
older
to translate it for us. I was going to ask you, Zing, and both of you, Joe, but let's start with you, Zing, saying, did you understand it? Did you understand what was going on? Because it made me think, did the rest of the world watch London 2012 and think, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, you do have to wonder whether they may be scratching their heads. I do think there were some parts I definitely learned a lot more about French culture than I expected to. For instance, there was an entire sequence featuring the animated Minions, which I had previously no idea were actually French. So I feel like just as much for international audiences, it is an education in how France sees itself and how Paris sees itself in particular.
And Joe Tanner, we didn't get Celine Dion, but we did get Lady Gaga. We got a naked man in blue. We got a flaming piano, and we got a singing guillotined head. But I think people were listening on that montage.
I lost count of how many thousand ponchos. I was quite impressed that I think the British team, Team GB, looked like the most decked out in ponchos, because I think we were probably the best prepared for the weather.
But not Keir
Keir
Starmer,
Starmer was refusing his poncho.
He has a GBT in blue hood.
Yeah,
Well,
in his
come on.
favourite navy.
People were
Paris
feeling quite
looks
patriotic.
magnificent, I think, and I think that was to communicate to the rest of the world. In the same way that London 2012, I didn't particularly, oh dear, here come the social media reaction, but the NHS hospital beds, I thought it was too much NHS initially.
Oh, goodness me,
But
it's
no,
blasphemous.
it's no reflection on the NHS
Sure.
itself. It
We're
was
going to pick this up. We're going to talk about London 2012 later,
Yeah.
but I do want to bring in our Air Vice Marshal. I like to say that. On the panel, sorry you guys, but you're not Air Vice Marshal. This is Bob Judson. There's been a pretty remarkable, and this is serious, pretty remarkable attempt to sabotage the Games. I know you were in the MOD bunker back in 2012 for the opening ceremony. How do you think your equivalents would have been feeling as it became clear that these attacks were happening and had been foiled but were happening and hadn't killed anyone? But what were your equivalents would have been feeling and doing?
Well, I mean, start at where we've just finished. I think they'll be very relieved that the opening ceremony is finished. They've got through that with no seemingly obvious disturbance to it. I think this morning clearly it would have been a pretty nervy time, and it would have been a nervy time whether something had happened or not, because it always is when you run up to these very big events. You contingency plan for all sorts of different things. The reality is that those attacks happened a long way outside any kind of obvious security zone for Paris. It would be very difficult to actually turn around and mitigate that risk from the outset.
I mean, you think that's why? Is it in a way proof that actually Paris's security was incredibly tight?
Yeah, I mean, you would logically think someone went for an easier target than trying to go for something in Paris. I mean, there's obviously a fair bit of speculation in the media been going on all day about who did it. I don't think anybody knows. I think it's not that helpful to speculate necessarily too much on that. But
although it does look coordinated and orchestrated, and I wonder whether that gives any pointers as to the kind of actors who might be behind it.
And it clearly was done by, you made the point earlier on, I mean, it was clearly done by somebody that knew what they were doing. They obviously had a decent go at making sure they did have a reasonable impact, but at the same time, an impact that wasn't life-threatening. They could have done stuff that actually was going to cause a lot more risk to life than that. It caused a lot of disruption, clearly, and will continue to cause a lot of disruption through the weekend, which is a great shame for anyone who's been planning to go or has been trying to go today.
I think we've got a chart actually that we can see that an hour before the ceremony there was a huge no-fly zone imposed. I don't know whether we're going to show that. I hope we are. But it does show quite how much. But there it is. How much protection there was around. Well, not just Paris, but I mean it's a pretty incredible picture, isn't it? I mean, France has gone to extraordinary lengths to protect these games.
Yeah, and I think that if I look back on London 2012, and obviously we've been through a couple of Olympic cycles since then, but the world has changed a bit since then. It is definitely in a more dangerous place now with some of the things that are going on. So I think for the French, it will have been a big deal to try and make sure that they do secure it to the absolute best of their ability. I think we in London were very, very conscious that the eyes of the world are on London and the UK as a whole, really. France will be exactly the same today. They'll be looking at making sure that nothing happens or the minimum amount happens on their watch. So air security is a really big part of that, obviously, and they'll take it very seriously.
And paint a picture for you back in 2012 in that bunker. What was it like? Was it incredibly nerve-wracking? What were you worrying about? And when did you get to relax?
At the end of the ceremony, I think we got to relax a little bit more. I think we were conscious that it was that is one of the very big moments where the worldwide broadcast audience is obviously looking at one thing and one place. And clearly in London, it was concentrated on the stadium because that was where it was all happening. In many ways, what the French have done, which I applaud them for in many ways, but I don't envy them from a security point of view because I suspect the challenge of securing a much, much bigger area to try and make sure that nothing disrupted it and caused any problems. And of course, some of the things that you're securing against are not actually security threats per se. You just end up with a power cut, or something goes wrong that disrupts the broadcast capability. That's a huge issue for them. So those sorts of things are all issues you have to contingency plan around. Transport, interruptions and delays and problems around that right up until the night when we were doing London. I mean, on the day there were a number of very nervous people in Cobra, in the government's emergency machinery, where we were having routine meetings to try and make sure everything ran as smoothly as it possibly could. And inevitably, you plan for the worst and hope for the best. And
you got the best.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, and I feel for the French tonight with the weather. I mean, you clearly that's a
poor old Paris. I felt sorry for Paris with that. I'm hoping that we're going to be able to be joined by someone from Paris. I think Annabelle Ayres, who's a British former Olympic rower and one of 6 official Olympian artists for Paris 2024, is somewhere in Paris. Annabelle, hello. Welcome to Newsline. Thank you after that big, fabulous opening ceremony. You're the official Olympian artist, so I've got to ask you, what's your artistic take on that ceremony you've just seen?
Well, I actually had a particularly sort of strange moment when the horse went down the middle of the river, because one of my pieces I've done is based on the work of Edouard Muybridge, who was a the 1850s who actually had quite a big influence on the artists in Paris around the time, because he was the person who proved that horses' legs came off the ground all together at one moment, and that's why artists started drawing horses correctly rather than rocking horses.
So there you go. So that was the amazing. I think the Roman goddess on her horse. Is that what you're talking about? That bit of the ceremony.
Exactly that. Yes.
But by the way, I've got to admire your very artistic forehead rings. Very, very impressive. But when it comes, though, there she is. That's the Roman goddess on whom the Seine's name is based, I'm told. When it comes to being the official artist, what does it mean? How do you get picked? And what do you have to do? Are you constantly sort of sketching through the Olympics?
No, well, we're not actually artists in residence as such. It's a programme that started in 2018 by the Olympic Museum, going back to Baron Kubertan's idea that, I mean, he was featured in the opening ceremony. So his idea was actually to have a